So we're about to have another sculpture forum discussion, and we've been to see a couple of exhibitions by the German artist Rosemarie Trockel. One at the Gladstone Gallery downtown, and one at Bruce Mager's Uptown. And I'm joined for this by a couple of regulars, Jock Ireland and Michael Brenson. And we are also joined on this occasion by Sam Lasko, artist. Um, Sam, thank you for joining us. Welcome. So I was vaguely aware. I mean, I was aware of Rosemary Trockel's work, but have not paid close attention to it. So I was very pleased to be able to see these two exhibitions, which seem to be a fairly comprehensive look at her oeuvre. Um, and they're both very elegant and quite stunningly, I think, beautiful exhibitions. And at the same time, the individual works were I found them fascinating and puzzling, and they seem to be stuff going on that was interesting, but I was having difficulty accessing, what really was happening, and felt I needed help, and I'm sure I'm going to get it now from Michael and Jock and Sam. So please, somebody help me.
Jock, do you want to jump in?
Well, I can jump in if you'd like, though I'm not sure that I might confuse things more than help. But my sort of highest level take is that Rosemary's an extreme realist. Um, she's a German. She's kind of a daughter of Dürer, but a 20th century, 21st century daughter, and that means a lot. Or there's a sort of Dürer is an old-fashioned artist. Rosemary is more anti-art person, anti-form, anti all kinds of things related to art, all kinds of things that we usually talk about appreciating in these forums. And um, she's part of, she's I guess, officially a conceptual artist, and part of a generation. She's my generation. She's about my age, and uh, came of age when there were all kinds of uh, what I call no manifestos. Saul LeWitt talked about no this, no that. Yvonne Rainer, a dancer, choreographer, talked about no drama or something, but a whole bunch of no art. Uh, that sort of attitude of resisting art in the old master sense was really active in the early 70s. And I was curious about conceptual art. So I was curious about minimalism, curious about this and that. I ended up going to the studio school and uh, sort of disengaging with a lot of those trends, if you like, movements, but still kind of fascinated. And I'm especially fascinated by Rosemary, who's stuck with all these no's and all this resistance. And her resistance has evolved. Um, and that's fascinating to me. Um, yeah, I think I should stop there. Uh,
Michael, is that consistent with your sense of what's happening?
Not really. I I mean, first of all, I'm grateful for, I mean, maybe it was Sam who suggested it, for getting us to these shows, and grateful to be part of this conversation. I'm very taken by this work, and and feel that she's actually found a way to make work that holds its own in a very complicated and very perverse present, and that interests me. So there's a bunch of stuff that I can put on the table, but maybe I'll just say a couple of things. One is to just emphasize what I think is a gestural part of the aspect of the work, meaning a kind of do this, do that, put this here. Whether it's a cell door, take the cell door, cast it, put it on the ceiling. The televisions, take two screens, sort of jam together, cast them in aluminum, put them on the wall. There's a kind of suddenness, a kind of way in which uh, intuition and intellect in her are completely merged. Um, and there's a particular force of attention or force of resolution that I feel runs through all this work that is very impressive to me. And I think a way in which it exists in the present, with a certain suddenness and resolution that begins to explain its sculptural quality for me. So even though the work doesn't look at all like statuary, there's a way in which it has a kind of authority of resolution that makes me think of statues, and I find this particular authority very sculptural, and therefore like completely appropriate to what the sculpture forum is about. And the other thing that I mentioned, I feel like these blind mother photographs. I mean, a lot of these decisions are really crazy, right? I mean, take a cell door, turn it upside down, put it on the ceiling. I feel like these blind mother images, and we know that they're somewhat informed by AI, and there are points in these images where the absurdity and ridiculousness of her humor, which I really appreciate, turns into something sinister. And these are disturbing images, ways in which her I mean, she's always making something very visible and making it kind of impossible to understand what the like, don't believe what the eyes can tell you, and you don't really ever completely know what you're looking at, and those are embodied for me. This is embodied for some degree in these photographs, where there's a kind of wrongness all the way through it, whether
Mm.
it's in the hair or the eyes or the proportion or whatever. And I feel like with these figures, like I'm looking at another species. So, like all the way through the work, there's something very familiar, but it's always being turned, and turned in such a way that in these images of the human, or what we're doing to the human, or what's happening to the human body, becomes something disturbing, creepy, and really interesting for me to think about. Like we're entering some other zone of what human beings are and what we're looking at and what we've become. So, just as a way of putting some ideas on the table, that's what I have to begin with.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, I'm excited that Michael landed on the portraits that were, as in my understanding, in part produced by AI or by running previous portraits she had through an AI model so that they took on maybe this sort of enigmatic or what's the word? Now I'm at a loss for the word, but yeah, that strangeness. It's compelling to me that Michael describes that as an embodied experience of looking and feeling the otherness of those photos and the strangeness and the perversion of them, because I guess to me, I was really excited to hear Sculpture Forum respond to this work, because my encounter with Sculpture Forum is through artists that are educating and looking very seriously at figurative sculpture, where the starting point to sculpting the figure is through clay. And my entry point to Rosemarie Trockel's work was also through my entry point to contemporary art, which came through ceramics and assemblage and then expanded from there. And so I relate to Rosemarie's work starting through her ceramics. And in the Gladstone show, I felt like a little disappointed maybe, or just uncomfortable in this way where that reminded me of all these other elements of her practice I've come to like learn about and negotiate since getting to know her through the clay work, and feeling like, oh, this is a dark show where like the subject matter, the engagement with technology there's a sort of a dark conclusion happening here. I feel pretty uncomfortable. Yeah. And then kind of within that, trying to find what holds me, what doesn't, sitting with it. And those portraits are like a wonder to look at. And they're figurative portraits of people. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't have any other conclusion. I'm just interested in that because they're also photographs, which are like the least embodied process to me of making art. Whereas to me, clay is like a really highly embodied, like hands-on, touchy, feely, like clay almost feels like you're touching another body. And I see Rosemarie having that conversation with ceramics. And I see her as an artist who's maybe her primary theme is contending with the objectification of bodies. So I think the portraits are something I was sitting with and kind of wondering about a lot.
You see the ceramic work because it's obviously made through touch. So, and there's an element of touch, particularly the Spruce Maker show, that's emphasized, but they're not tactile, right? There's always a kind of distance that's built in, I think, a way, so maybe you think you can get close to them, but you never really can. So there are ways of creating this strangeness or this otherness all the way through. And so even when the work that's the most embodied is put at some kind of distance or far away. I mean, even like the Hyde Park corner, that those two rectangular blocks where people stand, which are there to hold bodies, where they turn into blank pedestals and then they turn into something of vision. So it's all transformed into a visual experience, and in the course of becoming a visual experience, it becomes more powerful and at the same time always strange. Like again, you maybe knew what these things were, but you don't know what they are now, and you're never really sure what it is that you're looking at.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's my sense too. That I'm never really quite sure what I'm looking at, and I think that Michael, you mentioned distancing. I mean, I think that one is kept, very much at arm's length from the core of what it is that's being, you know, engaged in the work. And a lot of that is through really very, very beautiful presentation of the objects, which themselves are always, it seemed to me, very elegant and pristine. And so there's a kind of quality of, on the one hand, perfection present, I felt. And on the other hand, a real sense of mystery and uncertainty, um, in a way that is kind of either very off-putting or very engaging. And I found it engaging and discomforting both. And I think that may be, the appropriate response. I'm not sure.
But do you think that I think perfection is an interesting idea, particularly in relation to this sense of wrongness, like
Yes,
kind of
yes,
wrong, like there's something wrong
yes,
everywhere. There's something that doesn't fit.
yes, exactly.
But and but like you say, and she's working, with squares and rectangles and geometric forms where there's a kind of perfect scale and a kind of perfect containment. But within that, like, something something's locked up, something's wrong, something's gone haywire, something's really strange. And I think this sense of a darker of a darker vision, it seems almost more true with the Gladstone show than what we were looking at with the earlier work at Spruce Makers.
Yes,
Mhm.
I would agree with that. Yes, I mean, yeah, in a way, the work's very formal, and yet the content of the work is not through, or simply not simply through the kind of formal arrangement of parts. Um, the content is almost in spite of the formal arrangement of parts, it seemed to me.
Hmm. Um, I'm curious about what Jock said earlier about how he perceived this as sort of anti-art with a lot of refusal, and I agree there's a lot of refusal in her work. But I wonder if maybe anti-romantic is a word that I identify with more in here, um, especially the Gladstone show. But I just want to bring attention, I guess, for a moment to this piece that's on view right now for us. I thought this was a locket, and my friend I went to see the show with, who's really familiar with her work, thought of it as a mirror. I believe this piece was retitled Time is Irresistible in this show, but she's previously shown similar works and wall pieces that were titled Prisoner of Yourself, which have been spoken about as mirrors in a sense. But this,
The
oh, well,
time is irresistible, right? That's the title of the one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, but the Time is Irresistible piece to me feels like the most romantic, and maybe I'm projecting onto her ceramics more pleasure than is actually there. But I find that piece to be like, the most bodily. You can like feel it hanging. There's even a narrative of its weight built within the work and the chain link breaking. Um, the color is beautiful and really pleasurable and feels like, it's like spilled paint. It has this like pleasure materiality to it. And I feel like that really stands out in that show as the only really like lush, like otherworldly pleasure object happening in there. And then for the title to be like Time is Irresistible, this sort of joke because it can't be resisted, and yet we resist it so much. And then the subject of the portraits being the largest presence in the space to me still, and the locket narrative is potentially like a girlish. It makes me think of when I was a kid or watching a high school movie, and there's like a girl has like reveals what's inside her necklace locket, and maybe it's her grandparents or her boyfriend who cheated on her at summer camp or something, like who knows, but it feels like it's maybe just in defense of her. I think there is a really romantic element to her language, but it's very protected, and it's not revealed often, or maybe even in this show in the present, it's not so present.
But don't you feel like even that work, I mean, the colors seem kind of actually muddy to me. and the way the surface of it is kind of slapped on or seems sort of smacked on the red onto the blue, there's still like this sense of containment, and even like a slight sense of suffocation, I would say, where there's a kind of air there that can't get out. So while you have this form that looks like an idol to me a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I'm really interested in what you're saying. I'm not. I wonder about this airlessness though, and how that relates to what you're experiencing here.
Yeah, I agree, Michael. That piece was one that I responded to quite strongly. I felt it was I mean, I think as Sam, you're saying, it kind of has a kind of sensuousness,
Mm.
uh, just a kind of tactility and a kind of feel for material that has some kind of connection to being handmade, whereas everything else is so exquisitely produced, but without any trace of, for the most part, any trace of Rosemary's hand. That piece seemed to have a direct connection somehow to the maker, uh, which I found myself responding to in the context of everything else. At the same time, I agree with Michael. I mean, the more one kind of spent engaged with the more it seemed to also be about a kind of I felt a kind of squeezing something, a kind of a pressure. There seemed to be pressure from you know the surface back into the wall.
I guess I'm sorry, Jock. I interrupted you too, so I want to come back to you. But I guess it's a question of the energy in this work, like what kind of energy, and I feel even in a work like that. I mean, she's a bit like a sorcerer to me often, it's almost like a kind of witchcraft. I don't know. But I wonder about the kind of energy that seems contained in a work like that. What can happen with this energy? Is it a dangerous energy? Is it something that good for us? That's, naive language, but the energy seems complicated and again with a kind of darkness in it, or maybe where the toxicity is has merged with something that is really like abundant and fertile. I'm not sure, but it's always complicated and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether you agree with me, Sam, or
No, I think I do. It's interesting. What you said about airlessness is interesting. Now I'm thinking about some of the other works in the Spruth Mogers show, and her use of glaze, and how in that show there was a lot of this sort of metallic, almost black, very shiny and reflective glaze being used that I feel like is sort of, I also feel is sort of pushing me away or keeping me away from it's sort of, yeah, it's reflecting. It's a hard surface to look at or take in when it's that color. And I feel like there's sort of a resisting happening there. Um, as well as, or in an opposite way, then there's this really plain white Maiolica glaze that she uses a lot that's present there, especially in the Thank God for Toilet Paper pieces. Um, and in that one, it's a little more obvious. The Maiolica to me is a very traditional glaze. I don't know if that's exactly the glaze that's used to like seal toilets when they're mass produced and like clay slip is poured into a form. But to me, that's like quintessential Rosemarie, where she's referencing the mass produced material economy realities of what she's working with, um, of craft, of ceramics, as well as with textiles, and making kind of a joke about that. Uh, yeah, that white is also the white that a toilet comes in. It's the white that bathroom tiles are often produced in. My bathroom tiles are made of. And she's often working with those themes of craft and the domestic and everyday and mass-produced items. And I think the maybe airlessness of that is also a position about projected feminine spheres and her own choices about what to do with that language. But I also thought of the glaze in those pieces. Thank God for toilet paper. The way the metallic glaze is sort of slopped on top, and on top of the white, it seems like it's almost like it's like this scatological joke. Yeah, it's in so many different, in the glaze, in the clay, in many elements of the sculpture. Oh, and there's my algorithm.
I like Michael. Thank you, Sam. I like Michael. Your suggestion that she's a sorceress. Was that what you said?
Yes.
And that somehow or other these works are kind of spells that she's cast.
Yep.
I like that idea very much. Yes.
Jacques, we're Sam's question to you about the anti-art or anti-aesthetic, wondering how you're feeling through this discussion.
Well, I'm I have the well, that touch business with the time is irresistible piece. I that piece does stand out, but it doesn't. It's complicated by all the other pieces in the show. Uh, you got photographs, you've got a cast of a door, and you've got all kinds of things, and they all kind of work together to mess up any one thing. If you think of it, one thing as I don't know, even the thing you're going to buy, the thing you like, uh, it's complicated by all the other things in the show, and that complication, that uh, her resistance to making something special is what fascinates me, and it's and that's very unromantic, or anti-romantic genius kind of thing, and the uh, I don't know, the absence or the neutrality of her presence is the thing um, that fascinates me. I don't see her as a sorceress or any sort of hints of those dimensions. That kind of dimension is denied all over the place by just the blankness of so many things that she presents. Uh,
I don't know whether, I mean, maybe not wanting to make something special is right. I'm not sure, but I think she's definitely interested in power, and she's
Mhm.
definitely interested in making objects that have power. And
Yeah.
how do you do that? And also the work is it all the way through. It's very much about it's questioning the notion of identity. I mean, there's no clear identity to anything, and everything is twisted or thrown in some kind of other direction, and that sort of explains to me in itself her conceptual approach. I mean, in other words, if you're going to take that idea, then in a way you have to be an artist who works with multiple materials and multiple ideas and various approaches, so that and somewhere, then within this multiplicity and changing and twisting of identity, then a power image can actually happen. And yeah, I think these things have power, and it has something to do with the image and the changing image and the suddenness and the materiality and the scale. I mean, I think she has quite an uncanny sense of scale, of finding things that are the right size in relation to the material that she's working with. But I definitely think these works have power.
No, I agree. I agree with that, and I think there is something also quite seductive about them. You know, in the way they appeal to a kind of sense that they have power and status, the elegance and perfection that they are that their embodiment has resulted in is very powerful. And yet at the same time, there's this kind of presentation that is very, I guess I would say seductive, but hiding something mysterious and strange and perhaps not very nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, I rather than power, I'm thinking density, and the shows. I think of, we saw two shows, and they were shows that there was a completeness about each show um, that I that's what was powerful for me. Uh, and there's a, I don't know, neutrality is one word. Uh, and I don't know, the realism. There are we saw three couches or sofas or whatever, things you can sit on, and the two at Spruce were sort of the same, uh, but different colors. And then you saw another one that's quite different uh, at at Gladstone, um, and it I don't know, it made more sense having seen the two at Spruce Maggers, um, and it's that kind of that cumulative uh, I don't know, dimension. I mean, the first thing I heard when I walked into Spruce Maggers is don't sit on the couches or sofa, and that I don't know, that's part of this resistance that I'm trying to talk about. Um,
So what do we make in these works of this sense of expectancy? The couches too, like they're waiting. Everything. Maybe that's a little bit what you're referring to as a kind of blankness. I don't know, but they're waiting for something. But they're waiting for something, but they hold their own energy within it. And they're waiting for something that for an answer that kind of can't be given because the answer is already contained within them, even though they're like calling out to other people to get involved in some way. I think they hold their energy, whatever it is, but at the same time, they're anticipating and waiting and wanting us to be involved. I mean, this is part of their perversity, but it's also part of their power.
Yeah, they're very enigmatic, aren't they, in that sense, that they do seem to ask a question. Um, and as you suggest, Michael, the answer to the question is hidden within the work, and is in some sense ultimately inaccessible.
Hmm.
That was my experience, was to feel that I'm looking at something that is very compelling but enigmatic, and somehow that ultimately I have to find the satisfaction, uh, not exactly somewhere else, but somewhere different.
What do we think of the geometry of these works? Because they're, uh, circles, squares, rectangles. I mean, I do feel there's something quite ancient in them, and I can begin to get to that a little bit through the language of geometry and the kind of histories that they connect to, the histories of abstraction, but much older than that. And I feel like there's an impulse here that goes back very far in time. Um,
Hmm.
I feel it's very contemporary, very digital, very, unancient, uh, very just digital. Even those things that are talked about as uh, uh, hot plates or burners on stoves, they also feel like disks for computers that before used to have these CD things that I don't sense that. I mean, there's I don't mean to deny. I mean, that's an interesting thing to bring in, Michael, but it's much more. Uh, it doesn't have that kind of resonance for me.
It didn't for me either, Michael, and I'm not quite sure. I mean, I thought of, there's a kind of connection to someone like Mondrian, rather than to ancient uh, um, anything. Was what I felt, was
but if you go back to like the language to Mondrian, and you go back to Blinky Palermo and Motherwell and people like that, there was a pretty profound sense of relationship to the history of art, and through the and Mondrian, definitely true through the history of geometry, and I'm also thinking about these hints of images, what the work that Sam mentioned, the time is irresistible, with that, somewhat sense of of an idol, and the those coils from the burner. There's like an image of like a dancing idol too, and then you look at that leg, right? And you think about the fragments of the legs, and you think about Giacometti's leg, and I can go through Boyce and that, but through there's so much responsiveness to the history of art, and it's a broad responsiveness to all sorts of things, like all the way through it. And I also feel in this kind of darkness, even that we're talking about, like in the image of the human that might be coming across in the photographs, there's some connection to through another time, to like to when rituals happen and people did things to other people, and the memory of all that seems to be built into those photographs, for me at any rate. And then I'm wondering, I realize I'm talking a lot, but those blocks, and which are what, they're foam or whatever, but they also connect to me with blocks of stone, and they don't have any weight in her, but they connect to images that have a great deal of weight. So I feel like she's, at any rate, the conversations that she's having with the history of art are very broad, and I do think they go very deep.
Yeah, but she's always resisting. Those things don't come across as stones. They're foam, and not heavy. And it's I keep going back to these 70s and the no manifestos. She's resist. I don't even see um, Mondrian in the geometry. I see those as I say, digital. They used to punch cards for computers, and it's that kind of thing that go. I can't go back even to Mondrian with her geometry. Um,
Do you
I
think,
think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
oh, I just was I don't mean to interrupt, but do you think the digitalness, are you speaking about the foam works in particular, that makes you think about more about the digital than stone because of the speed that you can read into them when you see that they're foam?
I don't see speed in the foam. I mean, there's a certain quickness to the way she puts paint on, and in the that vitrine of small pieces, the foam is manipulated quickly and freshly and whatnot, but not uh, uh, just it's not heavy. I mean, I've seen even some of her ceramic pieces that feel much heavier than the photographs that I've seen anyway,
But
feel
I think
much heavier than the things we saw at Spruce.
But I think for me, part of the magic of the work is that she can make something out of foam that connects and maybe in some way, and obviously, we're talking about personal responses, has a kind of aesthetic weight that makes me think of objects that are related to them but are completely different. In other words, I do think she's trying to work something out in the present that's connected with the we use the word spell, we use the word sorcery, I'm using the word magic that connects up with images in the past that have had a great deal of power and doing it in a very, very different way.
Yeah, doing it in a kind of anonymous way. In the past, maybe, it was a sorcerer, it was a special person who put things together, and she's resisting that role, it seems to me.
But only a special person could do what she's doing.
Yeah, yeah, right. And I'm not trying to sort of undermine the validity of what she's doing, but it's she's resisting that role intensely, uh, and uh, and doing what she's doing. Garth, you ran that what was a course or whatever at uh,
Yes, yes.
back in the 70s, and Richard Deacon took that course, and he came out of it, and Bill Tucker commented on Richard, uh, and he said that having gone through that course, Richard was unteachable, or some students who came out of that course were unteachable. And that's sort of an amusing comment, but there's a kind of seriousness to it that is that is interesting to me, and it's part of that uh, no business, saying no to kind of everything, and it was a '70s thing.
You're implying that Rosemarie Trockel would come into the unteachable
Yeah,
category.
right. She could have been a student of yours. It's and I'm mixing everything up, and she is in this category of feminist conceptual artist, but she's a bigger person than that, uh, uh, and it's and it she's a bigger person because she's deeply embedded in her time.
And do you feel like there's a kind of knowledge you have or a sense of Truckle that you would have by living in Germany, by having lived in Germany that people who don't live in Germany wouldn't have?
Um, yes and no, maybe in many ways, maybe in the approach, in the installation sensibility, in the approach to ready-made and assemblage. I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways, and then in another way, I feel a little reticent to speak too clearly to that because I'm of a different generation and a different, I grew up in this country. I'm very informed by my American suburban upbringing, and I feel like I miss, and part of this is her own enigma, but I also feel like there's a lot of very specific reference points that I'm not reading in her work. And I feel pretty aware of that. Or like, there's points that I do access and things I miss. Um,
Yeah,
but
it's it.
in I think I would say I think her maybe the idea that she's a sorceress is a I'm a little reticent about that, even though I completely agree that, the circuitousness of her work, the many different ways she's referencing history and moving into the present and the patterns happening and forms. Uh, I agree that there's something she's really maybe an artist in the sense of a magician or a shaman. But maybe sorceress, I'm a little bit reluctant to sit with that because it seems like she's so the power of her work is so gendered. It's so charged with a gendered position that is this work because it's reluctant to put language on it that I think it's easy that's like an easy thing to say like, oh, it's feminine because it's really intuitive and it's maybe it I can't understand it, so it's witchcraft. Like that makes I'm a little wary to go there, but
Although I don't mean it that way.
okay.
And again, I think the combination of intuition and intellect, which I mentioned at the beginning, is quite remarkable because
Absolutely.
they're completely, slapped together like those two screens. They're inseparable. But what
Hmm.
I meant is that I felt she's someone who can do anything to anything. And
Yeah,
what she can do to it with her hands or with her mind is really surprising. And she's got a total conviction
absolutely.
that she can do what she wants, and whatever she wants to do she goes for it. And what she does, when we're looking at these, the blind mother portraits too, there's something definitely uncanny, and something about this movement from one reality to another, what she does, two things that other people wouldn't think about, that do have about them like almost like a slightly supernatural quality to me, and it's very rare. Other people wouldn't think of it, and I do think of that in terms. I mean, my own generalizations maybe about what witchcraft would be, and it's a completely positive word. It's
Hmm.
it's it's I'm talking about something powerful and dangerous and completely surprising.
Yeah, that I took completely agree with.
I
Yeah,
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt anybody, but I did think your question about the German context was
yeah.
an interesting one to me, Michael, because I did find myself thinking about Joseph Beuys in the context of these exhibitions. Does that ring a bell with anybody?
He feels super present to me here. I think she's really like so much of her, even though I don't even know that much about boys, I don't feel that confident speaking about his legacy, but I think she's so much of her power is in her coming up among a scene of very a very macho and masculine idea of an artist and an artist as an individual. Um, Personality and aura and a very, yeah, I think she came up in a really alienating environment. And I think she's spoken about her friendship with, I think it's Monica Spruth, who
Mhm.
started Spruth Mager's gallery. And I think she started it to show women. Um, One of the first contemporary art galleries in Germany that was showing women at that time. And um, I think New York was way ahead of Germany in that sense and at that time. So I think that's what I could put in perspective. But
Do you think, since you brought up the possibility of shamanism here or something shamanic, like if we're gonna talk about Boyce, and I think I agree with you, he's here, but without I mean, it's a different generation, and there was perhaps a kind of optimism in Boyce and that generation about what art could do. how art could really change the world. But it is
Mhm.
passed on in one form or another, and I'm interested if you see something, even possibly shamanic about this work, what that might be, or
Hmm.
if there's an idea of transformation here. I mean, there certainly is in relation to the materials and the images, like how far that idea of transformation extends to the person, to society, or just exactly what it means. But anyway, maybe just back to the shamanic question, if you actually feel there's a presence here of something shamanistic at all, what it might be.
For me, it was that the sense that these works are ultimately enigmas, um, very compelling. Uh, uh, they seem to make a demand on you, and at the same time, they withhold the satisfaction of an answer.
I mean, maybe part of the shamanistic power here is, yeah, the strength of like being suspended in this enigmatic place alongside how actively how strong the formalism is and how actively I'm moving from one thing to another through formal patterns like circle, you know, plexi frame, sphere, maybe stovetop into record player shape, or like wire into yarn. Yeah, there's a lot of movement between like language and then maybe, like figure, cowboy hat, ear patch made me think about Trump and the election and the power of that image, even though I'm not sure I know what I'm talking about here, if it's a Van Gogh reference or if there's something I don't know is being referenced here. But I think maybe the movement just between patterns. Also in the Gladstone show, there's a lot of doubling and flat patterning that feels like it's moving me through all the work that sort of keeps that enigma on its toes, and you don't really settle necessarily in one piece because they're so in conversation with each other.
Yeah, that is another question I had. That seeing these works in these two exhibitions all together is an accumulative kind of impact, and the works do seem to develop a kind of sense. Uh, with each new work, the mystery is deepened, the complexity grows, and it left me wondering what I would make of a single work in isolation, and whether it would have anything like the same kind of presence and impact that it had in this that the works had in this exhibition. No, there's no way to answer that, of course. It was just a thought, a random thought.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but that's I think at the heart of her work. And I've seen photographs of her. I don't know. I think they're clusters, called clusters of photographs of different kinds of artwork put, un superficially unrelated things put together. And she's been doing that for a long time. And that's fascinating to me. And that, that's at the heart of her work. There isn't one piece that can sort of stand for everything. It's the accumulation of different things, contradictory things, that that's, or at least for me, uh, at the heart of her work.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you just said, Joe. But
Well, I'm saying no to isolated, or trying to extract something special, and you know the way to get at her is to see a bunch of things the way we were lucky to be able to do. Uh, with these two shows. I did just one little thing. I saw the woven pieces at the Museum of Modern Art. There are a few of her things there now, and they made me think of you, Garth. And you go around the city, and when you see an abandoned glove on the street, you take a photograph of it. And I don't know why you take the photographs, and I don't expect you to go into that in great depth here, but those abandoned gloves are quite similar to, or at least I see them as close to the things that she has in that show at MoMA. And well, it's
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't see the MoMA show, so I can't comment on that. But
yeah,
I think I just want to say, so if she's gotten away from the mythology, from the particular kind of masculinity of boy, through the kind of belief, in myth and materials and a kind of a grandiose optimism, which I'm, also sympathetic with. Like, how do you make work in the aftermath of the wake of that, and someone who's had such a impact not just on Germany but world art? I'm very grateful for these works. Like, I do feel that they have a considerable power and potency and agency, and to manage to create such a diverse and body of work, that goes in so many different directions, and always has this kind of agency and kind of ability to address many aspects of the human condition, including this kind of darkness and perversity, and wickedness or whatever, and do it with a certain amount of humor and energy, and hold a kind of energy. Part of what we're saying of holding in is also an ability to contain some kind of real potency within the work. I'm grateful for it. They're real to me. They're images, they're works that I can do something with.
is it worth thinking and talking a little bit about her use of an attitude to engagement with material, with the stuff she makes? I mean, there's a remarkable contrast, I think, between her feeling for or absence of feeling for the stuff she's making things out of, um, compared to, say, Boyce, whose engagement with material was so kind of full-blooded, and he really loved stuff, it seems to me.
But I don't think I don't think her attitude toward materials is neutral. If it were, she wouldn't be able to do what she does with them. She wouldn't be able to do, I mean, I don't know with, plexiglass or some of them, but she can do like amazing things with foam.
Yeah.
So I think they mean something to her, but they certainly don't mean to her what they don't have this completeness that they had for Boyce, where it's a different kind of energy, but there's still energy within them. But anyway, I think your question, Garth, about what these materials actually mean to her is an interesting one, because they do mean something.
Yes, I wasn't implying that I didn't mean to imply that her use of materials or attitude to the material she's using was kind of neutral. But it is very distinct, I think, and very difficult to know, for me anyway, whether I mean, to what extent she enjoys, delights in, takes pleasure in the stuff that she's making things out of, which I didn't feel she did, but maybe she does, and maybe I just thinking that kind of coolness, the kind of what I think you mentioned, distancing, as if these things are produced almost by some anonymous person. I mean, I don't know. That was my kind of question.
But certainly to get back to the ceramics, that without the ceramics, the work would be very different, right? And the ceramics bring a certain kind of intimacy inevitably into the work, a certain kind of embodied quality, to get back to Sam's work. And if you take the ceramics work out of the work, you have a completely different body of work.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. At the same time, the ceramic work seemed almost to be, again, as if the sensuousness of clay, the way in which it feels in your hand and the way it's capable of responding to your, very intimate kind of movements. It didn't seem to me that in those clay pieces she makes it almost as if that was denied, that there was some way in which the clay was being used, that almost kind of said, this stuff is marvelous, but I don't want to get seduced by it.
Hmm.
What
Yeah,
is
I agree with that. She resists that for sure.
So? I mean, that was there's a kind of contradiction I felt in those pieces, that was to do with that kind of um, uh, I don't know, it's denial. It's not. It's an embrace of something at the same time as saying, you don't have to become self-indulgent here.
Hmm.
There is more to. Anyway, enough. Okay, have we exhausted the subject for the time being?
Thank you guys. It's a pleasure to hear you all speak about this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.